Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. China is on a charm offensive in Africa. It's the first visit by China's new president, Xi Jinping, and he's gone to a continent that's increasingly crucial to China's global interests. He was welcomed like a star on his arrival in Tanzania, walking along that long red carpet with cheering crowds and flanked by Tanzania's president, Jakaya Kikwete. However, suspicion of China's aims and behavior in Africa seems to be growing, and not just in the West. Some African intellectuals have sounded the alarm as well. And one of those is my guest today, Adama Gaye. Hello and welcome to you to the program.
Thank you.
You are a Senegalese writer and a former fellow at the universities of Johns Hopkins in America and the University of Beijing in China. And you're the author of the book China, Africa, the Dragon and the Ostrich. So, Adama Gaye, is Africa the ostrich? Is it burying its head in the sand while this sort of danger closes in?
I do think so. I think that in the face of the opportunities, but also the threats brought by China in its growing relationship with Africa, Africa is not properly addressing those issues, and it has, to a large extent, chosen to bury its head, not to seize those challenges.
When you say Africa, you're talking about the elites, or do people at large, do you think, understand these dangers?
It is a broad spectrum of criticism one can level, but you may not put at the forefront of those to be criticized the ordinary people. They are not supposed to lead their nations. Those who are the real culprits are the leaders of the continent.
What are they doing wrong, in your view?
They are not coming up with an approach that put forward the interests of Africa, whereas China has a clearly defined approach in embracing Africa in an increasing way in terms of getting access to the African natural resources, in terms of ensuring that Chinese companies are winning across the board the kind of business projects that exist in the continent because of the growing clout economic of the continent. And also, at the end of the day, the negotiations favors China, not African countries.
An example of this imbalance, you're talking about China often bringing its workers into Africa, and we've seen sometimes protests, even riots by locals looking for jobs in Africa when these Chinese plants have been set up.
Yes, but that is not even the worst side of the deal. The worst side is that there is no added value in this relationship. What China does is a duplication of an old practice that was done in Africa when Western countries, whether Belgium with King Leopold or the French, the UK and others, came and took the resources of Africa without creating value within the continent, manufacturing capacity for the continent, or developing the intellectual and know-how capacities of the continent, and then bringing them abroad and selling them again to African countries. That is not a balanced relationship in my mind.
There was, in those early days of colonization in Africa, also, of course, local collaborators who made sure that this colonial project could be implemented. Do you see a parallel today?
Absolutely. I believe that even slavery was made possible to a large extent by the collaboration of some African kings who were willing to take some useless gifts by slave traders and sending Africans abroad. I'm not going to exaggerate. What I'm trying to say is this: the parallel somehow can be made that these days the business road are open by Africans, whether they are in the financial sector, in the banking sector, at the political level, they are more interested in promoting what I would call individual nationalism, going to talk to the Chinese as if they are defending the interests of the continent. They are not doing what should have been the case, resource nationalism, for the profit of all of the continent.
You're talking here about banks, private banks and private companies in Africa.
Yes, but I can give even clearer example. Let me give you an example that happened recently in Senegal. Senegal is among those West African countries where there are prospects for discovering oil. There was a license that was given to the brother of the president who is associated with a Chinese company. And the company that was defeated in the process was that one that won the big oil discovery in Ghana in 2007. Instead, the brother of the president of Senegal, who has never been in the oil business, was given this. I believe that there is a real risk that the Chinese, by relying on those who are the insiders in government or in the financial and private sector in Africa, to deal with them on their own terms, may at the end of the day create the backlash of the ordinary citizenry who will feel left by these great talk about China inroads in Africa, and they are not going to see the benefit.
You've argued, of course, for a long time for a dialogue between China and Africa to be based not just at the level of officials, but how concretely would you see a way out of this then? What kind of dialogue could it be?
It is very difficult to have it because the Chinese, they have, because of their history, a centralized approach of their relationships. They want to have a state-centric relationship, from state to state, not from a state to civil society. They are now moving progressively in incorporating within China itself the bloggers and the civil society. They know that you cannot just have a top-down relationship. So in coming to Africa, I believe they must acknowledge that with the tradition of democratic move that we have experienced in Africa, with the expectation of the ordinary citizen to see a trickling down of the this great talk about Chinese bringing money and resources to Africa, financing, that if they don't make an effort, they will create enemies, and that is happening in some places. In Zambia and other places, Chinese companies have been criticized and rejected.
Do you think that African civil societies are actually more ready for that dialogue than Chinese non-state actors?
African civil society is not ready. It's not ready because it has not made the effort to understand, to grasp properly the issues at stake in this relationship. This requires that more and more education is developed to ensure that people know what is going on. Unfortunately, it is not the case. People talk in general terms about China being the new kid in town, going to be the real strategic partner, but they don't see beyond the rhetoric of goodwill discourse that China have been good at mastering, that at the end of the day, they may be sitting and under their watch allowing a new form that will be negative between China and Africa to develop.
I think there are some more African officials, though, who are sounding the alarm, as I mentioned earlier. And one of them is Sanusi Lamido, who is the governor of Nigeria's central bank. And he caused a stir with this piece in the Financial Times. We can see it there. He said, "China takes our primary goods and sells us manufactured ones. This was also the essence of colonialism. The British went to Africa and India to secure raw materials and markets. Africa is now willingly opening itself up to a new form of imperialism," said the governor of Nigeria's central bank. Do you think that perhaps that is going to change the awareness of people in Africa, this kind of statement?
No, not immediately, because you have a group of people with whom the Chinese are willing to do business with. These are the officials. These are the people who are ready to talk to the Chinese under their own terms. And unfortunately, they represent our countries. I believe, as an old proponent of a dialogue, strategic dialogue between China and Africa, I believe the Chinese needs to be careful not to follow and heed the advice of those people who are mainly driven by the satisfaction of their private interests. They want to privatize this relationship, and it is not good. I think the president of China, the prime minister of China, the new leadership that has taken charge almost 10 days ago, they need to be aware that Africans want to be open to the rest of the world to do dialogue, but to do it in terms that are balanced, in practical terms, not in theoretical terms.
Do you think there's any scope for that sort of relationship to develop within the broader format of the BRICS? Because Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, is then going to South Africa for this summit of Brazil, Russia, India, China, plus South Africa. What's going to take shape in that?
Yes, of course. It's very healthy to see that China has become the #1 economic trading partner of Africa, with almost $200 billion of trade exchange, when you know that barely 10 years ago, the level of trade was $10 billion. So this is an important shift that is happening in China-Africa relations, but also the emergence of these other countries that make up the BRIC, like Russia, like Brazil, India, and of course South Africa. This is a shift as part of the global South re-emerging and becoming a voice that has a say in world affairs. But the problem is this is not the first time that you have had a South-South dialogue. You have had it under the non-aligned movement. For Africa to be dealing with China and the others is good, but again, it should not be done in official term. In an opaque term, it has to be discussed broadly and openly. And the BRICS is not going to change overnight these countries. We have to make the changes internally within the 54 African countries where leadership is not always very effective, where the good governance that is promoted verbally is not always done and practiced in real term.
Okay, thank you very much for being on the interview, Adama Gaye, Senegalese writer. That's all for the interview on France 24.